We have with us this morning Reverend Dr. Jan Remer-Osborn. When I called my WISE connection, she offered Jan's name, and I was so pleased that there are willing volunteers on our UCC National Mental Health Network Board who are willing to come and be with churches and associations. Dr. Osborn received her bachelor's and master's degrees in music at Northwestern University, studying harp and composition. Her MDiv degree is from Chicago Theological Seminary, and she was ordained as a minister in the United Church of Christ in 2016. Her first call was at St. John's UCC in Orwigsburg, Pennsylvania. And currently, she is the designated pastor for New Beginnings Charge, UCC, St. Peter's and Trinity Churches in the Penn Northeast Conference. Dr. Osborn obtained her doctorate in clinical psychology from the Illinois Institute of Technology, and she completed her internship at the University of Chicago Medical Center. She specializes in the evaluation and treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, ADHD, and other neurological disorders. She recognizes the value of a holistic approach and embraces this model in her practice. She serves on our UCC National Mental Health Network Board, and we are happy today and fortunate to welcome her to the WNCA Educational Forum as we continue on our commitment to be a WISE association. Dr. Osborn.
Thank you, and good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I am so happy to be here today for all of you. My screen is making me dizzy right now as it's moving along. But I appreciate also the devotion. You've helped me get into a space to give this talk. Thank you so very much. Carla, I think, Reverend Carla, who gave that. Thank you so much. So today, we are going to cover a lot of material. I want you to, use this. You're going to have the slides to take home, and you're going to, I hope, use them further than what we can in the talk. There are a lot of exercises. Also, I'm hoping you bring these slides and this learning to your congregations and other people that you know, because it's very important right now that all of us have these skills. So next slide. So these are some of the topics we are going to be covering, and let's go on to the next slide. Let's get going. I see some of you here on my screen. I'm thinking you're here because you want to learn how to cope better, how to become more resilient. Any hands on that? Yes? No? We're great already? Okay. If you read this with me, the process of adapting well, as we define resilience, is adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. This actually has been the hallmark of my practice dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, but I really think happens almost with every client that I see. And sometimes this happens with us every day especially with people in ministry. We are dealing with the stresses that happen to families and relationships, the health problems and workplace and financial stressors. Another definition from the American Psychological Association is that it means bouncing back from difficult experiences. And I know that you all have done this already. So some of these things we're going to recognize what you're doing already and enhance those skills. Next slide. So if you haven't already noticed this past year, resilience takes everything we've got. Amen? Do I hear an amen? Amen. Right? Everything. How we think, how we take care of ourselves, managing our emotions that fluctuate throughout the day and weeks, and then leaning, of course, on our higher power. Next slide. So for me as a minister that I've come, and also in life, and life has been challenging for me, as I am sure it has been for many of you, that leaning on God is the ultimate go-to, because with God, all things are possible. And doing this presentation, I came across this verse, or these verses in 2 Peter, first chapter, and I will read it because it is so close to what we need to do, the skills we need to have to become more resilient. And I thought it was just fascinating that 2,000 years ago, here it is. For this very reason, you must make every effort to support your faith with goodness, and goodness with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with endurance, and endurance with godliness, and godliness with mutual affection, and mutual affection with love. For if these things are yours and are increasing among you, they keep you from being ineffective and unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So they keep us from being ineffective. So in other words, they help us be more effective and more fruitful. And that is what we hope these skills we're learning today will do. And we hear in Joshua that God commands us to be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Next slide. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Harold Kushner, Rabbi Kushner. And his book has been a go-to for me for many times when I want to throw up my hands with what's happening. And we've certainly now, I look back again, when we have seen that disease and death have taken away precious living and life. And I don't know about you and your families, but I have not lost anyone in my family, but there have been almost 20 people within my family that have had COVID. Okay, it's been, and people, long haulers, people in the hospital. It is scary. The rabbi, he encourages us that if we can acknowledge that God does not control everything, then we are able to turn to God for help. And that makes sense, because otherwise we say, God, why are you doing this to us? Why is this pandemic here? But if God is more aligned with us, it helps us have more realistic expectations. Now, Rabbi Kushner says we can be angry about what has happened without becoming angry at God. But personally, I get angry at God, okay? I rail at God. I find it helpful to rail at God, and I think God hears me. God is able to hold my anger, even if it is at God. So I disagree a little bit with that. But what he says, I really like, is that he says our indignation, our anger, our compassion, all of these things are what God is experiencing, and that he teaches us is to be that same way. to be angry at injustice. It is his anger, his concern, his compassion, or her compassion, of God's compassion through us, that we are this way, so that when we cry out, we are still on God's side and God on ours. Next slide, please. Okay, you're probably thinking we don't need any more stress. Why do we need it? I'm stressed enough. But it's natural to have stress. It's normal, and there is an optimal amount of stress. It prepares us for action and focuses our attention. But what we need to do is to use it wisely. How do we effectively use it? As we just read that effective use in the scripture. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is close to a model that I have used for a long time with all my clients and how I understand. I see, like, we have a vessel, okay, and you see a bucket on the side. So we have a vessel, and we have in the bottom of the vessel or container, we have our optimal stress that we need to get up in the morning. And then as the day goes on or the weeks go on, things get added up. In the pandemic, we have our optimal stress in the morning, and then we have this big chunk that is everything that the pandemic is. It's added, so we're already halfway up that bucket or container. And then all these other things go on. I don't know about you, but it was not an easy adaptation to go from preaching every week, face-to-face, to online or YouTube preaching. All the technical things that we had to learn, looking into a camera and trying to pretend that your congregation is out there. All these things we had to adapt to as ministers, and our congregation had to also adapt. Or not. Okay. A lot of them don't like it. So what we need to do, though, when the stress starts building up, all these things you see on your slide that go along with COVID, is we need to intervene. It can be as simple as taking a few breaths throughout the day. And I advise this for all my clients. And I have done this throughout my career, is to take 3 calming breaths, maybe 4 times a day throughout the day and before bedtime. It lowers your blood pressure, okay? It helps you, it decreases the tension in your muscles. It drains some of that stress out, as we see that water coming out of that slide. Mindfulness are some other techniques that we're going to do, and social connectedness. But when this stress overflows, if we are not doing these things, this is when we see anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. So it's very important to manage and keep that container from not overflowing. Next slide, please. So the greatest fear really we have is of the unknown. Looking back a year ago, it's been a year since we've been going through this pandemic. If we had any idea that we would be losing 500,000 people to COVID already by death, I actually think we would have been more scared. Maybe the unknown was better in this case. But it was interesting. And so some of the research I was doing to prepare for this talk, to find out that people who had already had COVID were a little more optimistic about the future than those who didn't. And for me, that was, they already know what it is and they survived it. And so they are not as frightened. For we who have not experienced it personally, I think it's pretty terrifying. Next slide, please. If you've been paying attention to the news, we know that for people of color, COVID, it hits them harder. It's because of where they work, the kinds of jobs they have, the transportation, limited access to health. And you see that on the diagram, that people of color have more anxiety and depression, more symptoms during the pandemic than white people. But there's something really fascinating that I found out about this. Next slide. Okay, we know that African Americans, who are 12.5% of our population in the United States, account for 23% of COVID-19 deaths. 3.5 times more likely to die than white people. But what we are seeing is that African Americans across all incomes who lost their jobs are more optimistic, report better mental health than whites who have lost their jobs. There is significantly better mental health in African Americans and Hispanics compared to their counterparts economically. More optimistic. Now that is a surprising finding. And so the authors could only conjecture why this is going on. We would expect the opposite. One of their thoughts is that there's historically minorities face a lot of adversity and are used to it. And they have strong community ties. And for some, that belief that education will help them is more promising and more hopeful than for at least low-income whites. I like in this picture I have on the side, you never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. Isn't that the truth? If you've lived through stuff, you know this. You never anticipated that you could get through what you get through. And you wouldn't do some of this stuff until you were pushed to the wall. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So as we talk about mental illness, we're all at more risk for it. And I don't know about you, but I certainly know that my level of anxiety has increased. I'm aware of it. I notice it. I notice in my own practice, and if you're seeing this in your congregations, more people, we are jammed. I am jammed. And because of that, I took more people were coming until I got overworked. That ever happened to you? You hear the voices call and they come in and you're answering them. And finally, I was sort of, mini freaking out myself. And I said, no, I have to step back. I can't help my existing clients if I keep taking more people. But there are people who are more at risk. Some we've mentioned before, communities of color, essential workers. But parents and children, people experiencing job loss, and young adults are more at risk of experiencing mental health issues or substance abuse. Please look at this side on your left. So this is not maybe too surprising. So you're looking at the average share of adults reporting symptoms of anxiety and depression in January in 2019 versus 2020. It has increased by 4 times. I think that's an underestimate because not everybody will admit it. Okay, next slide, please. There is another surprising finding, okay, from NAMI, which is a great organization. I used to be on the board of it when I was in Chicago. The NAMI of DuPage was a strong group and extremely helpful. If you have one in your area, to tell people to go to this group for families and clients. And as they did great training for me also as a psychologist. Taught me a lot about issues and why we are failing in as mental health practitioners in treating people with mental health issues. So what NAMI is saying is that those who have mental health and other disabilities possibly are also doing well, because they have already learned how to cope with isolation and unemployment and illness. They already have these. And through these things, they have learned to have improved appreciation and stronger relationships and a better spiritual life. This is surprising to me. I didn't expect to see this. Next slide. So here we are. That's kind of the scope. We covered the scope of what's going on. Now we are going to get into the meat of what to do. This is the cornerstone of everything I'm talking about. How we think. So you'll see that, we can't control the events that happen. And thoughts do pop in, okay? Sometimes a thought just comes in. We can't control that thought, but we can modify it. We can enhance it. We can feed it or we can starve it. And then our behavior, we can choose to avoid or deal with what's going on. I meet a lot of worrywarts in my profession, okay? Worry is their way of life. My mother was a worrier, okay? I don't think, I inherited other things from her, but not that. I got enough of the other things, but that I don't. And that is taking something and just hanging on to it, all right? And what's even worse is when we find something else and we go to the end with it. You ever you take something like, okay, I have a broken fingernail. It must mean I'm nutritionally deprived. I'm going to, get ill and I'll be in a hospital. And now my children are not going to have parents and my congregation won't have a minister. Do you know anybody who thinks like that? You start with one thing and you go all the way there. So what I teach people is to catch those thoughts soon. Notice your negative thinking. It can be, I'll never get this sermon done. Or I have no clue what I'm going to write. How many of us have thought that? It's Friday and we are looking at Sunday as an OMG, I have nothing in my head. How many of us stood with nothing to say on Sunday? Have any of us? We came up with something. So what we have to do is to stop those thoughts as soon as we can catch them, so we don't become a repository of negative thinking. It's one reason many people stopped watching the news this year. And I myself have stopped it this year. I watched it more last year. I'm done. I'm just done. It's mostly negative. I don't have control over it. I watch enough to be aware, or I read it on my phone. So the simple thing we have talked about is saying stop to these thoughts. And the other thing is the reality test. So really, what is the probability that you won't have a sermon on Sunday? When you're looking, well, maybe 0. It's never happened. Okay, to be realistic, and then counter it with something positive. So I would like you right now to just close your eyes for a second. I want you to think of something you want to accomplish and envision a positive outcome. Let's just do this for a little bit. Thank you. Next slide, please. So it's important to know that multitasking is a myth. All right, it cannot happen. What we are really doing is we switch quickly, and women are better than this than men because we have a bigger bridge between this, the both halves of the brain. So we can do this, but we can only think of one thing at a time. We can only do one thing at a time. So one way to get rid of those negative emotions is to put positive ones there, to put positive thoughts. So when you're struck with some of these negative things, look for something you are grateful for. That's why it's good to start your day with a thankfulness prayer. Notice your blessings. Our thoughts really kind of create who we are. It creates the world we live in 24/7 in our heads. And so it's important, you know, when you're decorating those walls of your brain, to decorate it with beauty and good things and put away all those dark pictures. We don't want those hanging up on the walls of our brain. These things promote resilience. And sometimes it comes to the fact, we see this in ministry and in many things, that you need to support yourself when others fail to do so. You need to be your own best advocate and realize, of course, that you have God right behind you, having your back. Next slide. Well, I can't do this. You're asking me now to do all these things on top of all the stuff I'm doing. And I regret it's P&P, I think, are the initials of the guys who've done the stages of change model. I meant to look it up, but it slipped my mind. This is one of the reasons why we're having so much difficulty adapting, is because it takes a lot of stages. It takes a while to get there. It takes a while. We need to go through all these things, thinking about it, maybe even pre-thinking about it, and then determining we do it, and then doing the action. But COVID says, no, you don't have time to do this. You don't have time to do this. You got to do this now. You have to adapt now. You have to teach your kids on the computer now. You have to homeschool your kids now. And so, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So some of it is thinking that, okay, bad things happen. We've talked about this. For many of us, this too shall pass is a phrase that carries me through, because it will change. Okay, this too shall pass. Another thing that helps me is say, this is not all about me. Okay. I am not the center of the universe. We're going through this together. Other people are doing it. Here we are. And so being open to this point of view is important. And we know we lag behind change because look, we treat our 8-year-olds like 6-year-olds. We treat our teenagers like they're 10. Okay, remember, it's so hard to adapt to them getting older. We want to stay in that old way. Next slide, please. So we need to shift our perspective and become flexible. And I have the word acceptance here, but I'm going to marginalize that. I think I would like to put acknowledge rather than accept, because I think to accept everything we're going through means almost like we're inviting it and it's okay. And it's not okay. I don't think it's okay. So I'm going to like flexibility and adapting well and acknowledging. So we need to confront reality. I was going through an extremely difficult time in the life of my family. And the statement I had to say to myself over and over, and then I was saying it out loud and driving my spouse crazy, is it is what it is. It is what it is. I can't change it. It is what it is. And I had to let go of how unfair the situation was. I couldn't afford to waste my energy. I needed to problem solve, not resist that it was really happening. And we had to work with what we have. So the question is, how can we be effective? Thank you for typing that in there. Okay, I appreciate that. How can we be effective? Next slide. Well, since by now, most of us have gotten through stuff. We know what our strengths are. Be specific and write down what are the things that have gotten you through before. I think for me, one of the big things, maybe problem solving, but one of them, the biggest one, has been determination. Just determined. And I don't know if that comes from my stubbornness coming from German stock or what, but I'm just determined somehow to do it. You know, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna handle it, and but sometimes I can't. So that's when we go to God. So use those to find ways to deal with the now. Next slide, please. One thing I wanted to say, and it's applicable with any sign, is that I find that for much of my life, and I don't know about you, I'm spending it making lemonade out of lemons. We get a lot of lemons. And so I find that, okay, how can I make this work? How can I make this better? And I do this with my clients all the time. How can we take this, what's happened, and do things that will make your life better? How can we change this? And so here's where my German stubbornness comes in handy. So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest, we will not give up. So perseverance, that means we have hope. When we have conviction, we can get this. And then we have to sustain that effort. We have to keep going. And when it comes from within us, that motivation comes from within us, we will be more effective. And sometimes when that's an empty vessel, that's when we go to God and get our motivation from God. So find those personality characteristics and resources and people you have leaned on in the past to get you through things now. Hone in on your past successes. Tell yourself how you can succeed now. And then move and do not look back, but stay in the present. I liked what we heard about going from, okay, this is a memory test for me, from what Carla was saying. What the first thing was, what am I cooking? What was the middle one? Anybody? Do a shout out. 3 things.
Raw,
Raw, cooked, and on fire. Okay,
yeah.
raw, cooked, and on fire. And
Yeah.
I like that because that's kind of what this is. We're coming here raw. We're trying to today get cooked with some of these tools. Okay. And then I hope that you go and take what lights your fire, use that as your motivation. Okay, to get through things. Next slide, please. So I want you to take a moment. I'll first look at this. You know, to get to a goal, we have to have realistic ones to start with, maybe a timeline, a to-do list, and small achievable steps. So I want you to take that goal that you were envisioning a few moments ago, that goal that you want to accomplish, and close your eyes and see what those steps are. See what some steps to do that would be. And see yourself rewarding yourself after each step. A 15-minute break, a cup of extravagantly expensive coffee, A good book. Okay. Come back to me. All right, open your eyes. Look at what others have done, that what you want to do, and draw courage from them. There was a time in my life that was so bleak that the only book that seemed to talk to me was Dr. Frankl's Search for Meaning. Very helpful to get through that and use that. I leaned on him for courage. If he could get through that, I could get through this. Okay. Seeking out resources, seeking out role models. Next slide, please. And we're going to speak up about mindfulness. It is so much vogue today. And I've used it with my clients. I use it with myself. It's really becoming present, okay? And it keeps us from harping, I shouldn't use that word, being a harpist, but it keeps us from harping on the past, moves us into right now, and sharpens our attention. So our body is here, okay? Remember, I like this slide because our body is here. You need to bring the rest of you with it, okay? You are here, and then you can focus forward on the future. Next slide, please. So this is something I want you to take home and do. It's too much to do now, and I'm probably already over time. So do these things, okay? And it is meaningful. I've done this in sessions with people. I do this with myself. Next slide, please. I'm kind of, well, there's a slide probably would have been better here. But when you're doing, let's not forget the physical, okay? Nothing happens unless we have our health. So this is really a foundational thing too. The cornerstone of thinking is getting, of improvement is getting rid of that negative thinking, but we need to be healthy. So you need to take care of yourself. I have a client who came with all kinds of symptoms. Couldn't sleep, anxious, irritable. His wife was ready to throw him out the door. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes and drank about 8 cups of caffeinated tea after he got home from work, or one pack was after work. So of course he couldn't sleep. So he was very motivated, and he really cut down on his tea drinking and his cigarette smoking. And guess what? He slept better, less anxious. All these things happened just from changing some of the physical aspects of what he was doing. So next slide, please. This for me, I don't know for you, but coming from Chicago and then moving into rural Pennsylvania and only being here now 4 years and having changed churches too, it's kind of, I don't know a whole lot of people, okay? All the people I knew in my past congregation who I grew close to, I can't see, okay? And then all the new people, I can't see because of COVID. So, and I can't make new friends either. So it has been kind of lonely. I don't know about you. So I've stated, I have clergy groups and Zoom groups and all that, but it just isn't the same. When our stress increases, we are programmed to seek out social bonding. It makes us feel better. We know this with the elderly, that those people who are socially connected do better, live more healthier lives, live longer, and it's for us too. But if you can't get with people, give. Altruistic acts leads to stress relief. It gets those positive feelings going. So give to your local food pantry, do some other things. It makes us feel good. It can be a substitute for actually seeing people in terms of our health. Next slide, please. How many of you are caregivers? Hands? Can I see some hands? How many of you take care of other people? How many take care of your parishioners? We put ourselves at the end of the list. Okay. And that's what was happening to me in the fall when I was taking more and more patients. Okay. I can do this. I should be able to treat these people. It's my job. I have the skill. They're out there. No, I needed to take care of myself. If it were another colleague coming to me with those kinds of, anxieties that were growing, or fatigue, or those issues from having too heavy a caseload, I would have said, cut it out. Take it easy. You are doing the best that you can. I want you to take your hand on your heart and just take a deep breath and exhale. Put it down on your heart, on your chest. Let me see it, guys. I'm not seeing everybody with their hand on their heart that I have. Okay, and take a deep breath and exhale. Let's do 2 more. It felt so good. Breathe out always through your mouth. Gets rid of more carbon dioxide if you do that. 1 more inhale through your nose and out through your mouth. I feel better already. Next slide, please. So this is the slide I wanted back before when I was talking about mindfulness. That's it. It goes back there as well. It goes there too, but this we have now. I'm telling you that the beauty of Pennsylvania and the mountains here, the mountains have become my friends. I go out and look at them, and I immediately am taking a deeper breath. Immediately, I notice it. I breathe more freely. We can go out in nature. You don't even have to wear a mask if it's not too many people. Look at these things carefully that I've listed and see why. Especially number 2, the nature walk. For those overactive thinkers that are worrying, this lowers activity in the prefrontal cortex that is active. Okay, this gets at endorphins going. This helps our cingulate cortex, which is that thing that obsessively ruminates for us. So do that. And that's what I do now. Instead of going to the gym, I take walks, and I have this little thing that I bought that I can pedal. Okay, to help me get rid of that COVID-19. Okay, that calm down. Next slide, please. So this is what I want you to do. This is a good slide to print out and have. To really make this useful, to make this that everything that both Brenda and Carla said that we should get out of today. Use this and take this as a map. And pick an accountability buddy. Pick someone to do this with. Sometimes as a psychologist, I feel that is my best role with my clients, is they're accountable to me. They don't want to let me down. They've said they will do something, but they want to keep their word. One thing at a time. Start with 5 minutes of daily physical activity. The sleep, all these things. Count your blessings, be grateful. Visualize a hopeful future. Seek people who will support you and stay away from those who will pull you down, okay? Make sure you limit that. Motivate yourself today by recalling how you succeeded in the past. Next slide, please. So here we are. How much overtime? I don't know how. I was trying to watch it, but I hope I've done this in a timely way. Any questions? Thank you for listening today. It's a lot of stuff. Thank you, Carla. I don't see. I have to get my view so I'm not so big. Can we get rid of the slideshow so I can see everybody?
Sure, I'll do that. And while I'm doing that, Gary, if you want to unmute yourself, Gary Cyphers has a question.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Would it be possible for us to access or have your slides sent to us so that we could use them back at our church?
Absolutely. Okay, the slides, I've already requested that they be sent, okay, that you have them. I mean, like the printouts, you know, I don't know about the actual slides, but this will be on video. This is recorded. So you could present the video of this.
Thank you.
But they can send the slides too, okay? The
That
slides.
would be very helpful.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. All right.
Thank you.
Just thank you. We can add on that person that I did not, PNC, not PNP for the change thing. And that book that's on the end, Everyday Resilience, it kind of gave me a framework to do this. I went off of that. It's very good by a good MD. It's a nice handy book to have. So I recommend that. Okay. Yeah. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Anything else?
We thank you so much, Jan, for this great presentation. And as clergy and congregation members, we always need to hear things like this from someone who knows how we should take care of ourselves and who is willing to give us permission to do that. So thank you.